Did you guys hear about this? Donald Trump last week was doing that press conference where he's sitting there looking like a petulant child. And he was talking about the government shutdown, the lack of military pay. And boy, he came up with an answer.
Without their first full paychecks, federal workers.
By the way, a friend of mine, talking about donors, a friend of mine, a man that's great. I'm not going to use his name unless he lets me do it. Susie can tell you about this, but he called us the other day and he said, I'd like to contribute any shortfall you have because of the Democrat shutdown. I'd like to personally contribute any shortfall you have with the military, because I love the military and I love the country, and any shortfall, if there's a shortfall, I'll contribute it. And today he sent us a check for $130 million. I would love to tell you he doesn't really want the recognition, if you want to know the truth, but he gave us a check for $130 million, which was sort of a shortfall, yeah. And that's going to go to the military, yeah. Is that the correct number? $130 million. That's what I call a patriot.
Donald Trump announced $130 million with an M. $130 million given to him by a good friend of his, an anonymous good friend of his, to pay the military during this Democrat government shutdown. To pay the military. I want to say that number again. $130 million. That's not enough money. Let me get to those details in a second. Here's the beginning of some details to this madness. The donation was made on the condition that it be used to offset the cost of service members' salaries and benefits. That's what Sean Parnell said. And he said, adding that the money was accepted under the department's, quote, general gift acceptance authority. So again, that $130 million donation is unlikely to make any meaningful impact toward covering salaries of the roughly 1.3 million active duty military troops, which would result, in case you guys didn't know the math, about $100 per service member. Congratulations. There's that patriot giving each service member $100, to offset all of their salaries and benefits for the time of this Democrat government shutdown. So that's the first bullet. Here's more. Using anonymous donations to fund our military raises troubling questions of whether our own troops are at risk of literally being bought and paid for by foreign powers. That's what Senator Chris Coons said. Budget experts also questioned whether using the donation to pay military members runs afoul of the Anti-Deficiency Act, which forbids federal agencies from using federal funds that exceed what have been allocated to them. Democrats have accused the administration of violating that law multiple times during the shutdown, including in his decision to fire thousands of federal workers. He's like, y'all haven't stopped me yet from breaking rules and destroying rules and ripping up the Constitution while we have this government shutdown that I keep complaining about, while at the same time doing things that I'm celebrating that I get to do, and then blame it on Democrats that nobody's buying, by the way. In response to questions about the donor's identity and whether they have any ties to foreign entities or interests, a White House spokeswoman referred questions to the Pentagon and the Treasury. Okay, so start there. The White House punted to the Pentagon and the Treasury. Then the Pentagon referred those questions back to the White House. Then the Treasury did not immediately respond for any request for comment either. So when the questions are asked, the ball gets kicked around all over the place because they're all working in conjunction to not answer any questions anymore. So it was kicked from the Pentagon, I guess, to the Treasury and the White House back to the Pentagon and Treasury. And the Treasury gave a couple big middle fingers and said, what do you think this was? America? So that's, like I said, the first BS line of this. But Harry Sisson, I saw him post this and I was thinking, what is this actually about?
So the mystery man behind the donation, his name is Timothy Mellon. He's a billionaire, a backer of Donald Trump, and he's the heir to the Mellon fortune. It's like this huge bank. And here he is. He's kind of like a low profile billionaire. He doesn't do a lot of press, so you might not have heard of him before. But initially, Donald Trump would not reveal his identity. It was only discovered after someone in the administration spoke to the New York Times and other outlets. But here's where the story gets weird. His father, Paul Mellon, is listed in the Epstein flight logs. He's logged twice, so it appears he flew on the plane multiple times. You can see it's labeled J.E. for Jeffrey Epstein, then it's Paul Mellon, and then two females listed both times. And it gets even weirder because the Bank of New York Mellon Mellon, where he's obviously connected, was recently sued by a woman who was abused by Epstein, alleging that the banks knowingly provided financial services that enabled him to conduct his operation for years. So these are the people that Donald Trump is friends with, and maybe this donation was kind of like a thank you for not releasing the Epstein files.
I guess the last part is just a bit of an assumption that Harry gets to make. I mean, considering, as he was pointing out, this guy, the anonymous donor that Donald Trump said, I mean, I'm only going to say his name if he really wants me to, but there's a reason why he probably didn't want you to. But apparently reports let go. It went to the New York Times first. So don't believe Harry Sisson, since you think he's, this super lib who lies all the time about a president who lies all the time. How about we believe some reality about what is that happened? A woman who says she was abused by the late financier and sex offender Jeffrey Epstein sued Bank of America and the Bank of New York Mellon on Wednesday, alleging that the banks knowingly provided financial services that enabled his sex trafficking operation for years. We don't think the suit has any merit, and we're going to contest it vigorously. That's what Bank of New York CEO Robin Vance said on Thursday. Here's more. She's represented by law firms Boyce, Schiller, and Edwards Henderson, who previously secured settlements of $75 million and $290 million with Deutsche Bank and JP Morgan, respectively, over their alleged financial ties to Epstein as well. Neither Deutsche nor JP Morgan admitted wrongdoing in agreeing to settle. Whenever Donald Trump talks about his settlements he's got with ABC News and George Stephanopoulos and the other pressure he's put on colleges, universities, and other media outlets, and he says, that's a clear slam dunk. They were abusing and doing things wrong to me unfairly. So in going with that same mindset, these two banks that were sued for $75 million and $290 million for financial ties to Jeffrey Epstein, they settled. So if you believe you're a MAGA king, you should also believe that these two banks potentially are admitting to complete wrongdoing. I mean, that's according to the president of the United States. Of course, the woman who's suing is keeping her name anonymous because we're full of child sex trafficking folks in this country. So Jane Doe said she opened a Bank of America account in 2013 at the direction of Richard Kahn, who's Epstein's former accountant, and that Kahn regularly sent her money for rent through that account. Lawyers for Kahn did not immediately respond. Doe said in 2015, 2 years later, Kahn's assistant told her that Epstein was adding her to the payroll for a, quote, sham company and that she would receive funds through her Bank of America account. She said she did not know the purpose of those payments. So as she's being trafficked and abused consistently by these folks, she's also being paid and kept basically on retainer, having her rent paid. So she's kind of their, enslaved person. The lawsuit against BNY said the bank gave a line of credit to MC2, a modeling agency that the lawsuit said Epstein and French model scout Jean-Luc Brunel used to traffic victims. So in total, BNY processed $378 million in payments to women trafficked by Epstein. $378 million going through this bank. Brunel was arrested in December of 2020 and was found dead in jail in 2022. That's according to Parisian prosecutors. Both lawsuits said the banks should have filed suspicious activity reports with the U.S. Treasury Department. The lawsuits said such reports could have helped law enforcement stop Epstein sooner. Isn't it weird how these guys that are associated with Epstein and child sex trafficking, when they're busted and go to jail, they end up dead? That guy ended up dead, and he was associated with that, that whole situation. Jeffrey Epstein ended up dead, and he was definitely associated with that whole situation. So now we've got this anonymous funder of $130 million to the military to pay for their salaries and their benefits. And Donald Trump is gleefully talking about how this guy is a patriot when his father apparently was on these Epstein flight logs. And we're left to wonder, according to Harry Sisson, is this like a thank you, $130 million? And is Donald Trump dumb enough to think that people will believe, oh man, $130 million the military is taken care of? Now all you got to do is come after these dirty, nasty Democrats who shut down the government to keep that $130 million. I'm sorry, that $100 per military's active service duty pocket to make sure it's filled with that crisp $100 bill. They're great now. Maybe they can pay for a couple of apples and bananas at the store.